In today's video, I'm going to share with you the top interview questions today with examples of answers, both good and bad, in a bit to help you to improve your own.
So Dan, what is your worst failure? While working as a financial analyst, I had to deliver an important report for us to prepare for a quarterly audit. And eventually I hurried up and made a mistake, which I luckily caught in time right when I was presenting this to my boss. He wasn't too happy. However, there was no serious impact because of this. My greatest learning from this experience would be that I should triple check my work before presenting it to my boss and eventually cross-check it with my colleagues to prevent such issues from happening again in the future.
What do you think? Is this an eye-watering answer? It doesn't really sound like one, and let me explain to you why. In this answer, the candidate intentionally minimizes the impact of the failure for being afraid of not getting disqualified from the job interview or putting himself in a bad light. And this usually happens with people who don't really understand why they're being asked for a failure story. And I explain this in a moment, but before that, to be fair here, you will not get disqualified with such an answer in a job interview. However, by minimizing its impact, you will also minimize your options to bias the interviewer towards you towards a favorable recommendation, right? Now, getting as to why you're getting asked for a failure story in a job interview, there are three main reasons to consider. The first reason is that usually failure stories are harder to answer if you hear them for the first time. So this is how the interviewer can easily understand if the candidate actually prepared for the job interview. The second reason you're getting asked for a failure story in a job interview is because people with a significant amount of experience will have proper failures, such as a failed startup. If you're only just beginning, you don't really have failures, then you might also be perceived as someone not sufficiently experienced for the job, unfortunately. So here the main takeaway is, if you brainstorm for failures, try to brainstorm for proper failure stories. And the third reason someone would ask you for a failure, and this is the more scientific one, is because they want to see what you learned from that specific failure. And here a recommendation is that to use up to half of your answer to highlight on the learnings you had from that specific failure, of course ideally tailored to the audience that you have in the interview. For example, if you have a technical audience, then focus on the technical learnings from your failure.
Dan, can you tell me about the recent disagreement you had with your boss? What was the conflict and what was the outcome? Sure, in 2019, we were working on an app with a tight deadline and budget, so my manager had decided that the accessibility features were no longer a priority. I disagreed with him on the spot, myself being visually impaired, and threatened to leave the project altogether. In the end, we found some middle ground by reducing the feature set and working longer hours in order to deliver the application.
Is this a good answer? Yes, it's actually a great one, especially if you want to exhibit backbone when answering questions about interpersonal skills. Even if it's concise, to me it qualifies as an eye-watering answer, especially since it's also a real example of an actual candidate. And by the way, if you have a better one, please feel welcome to share it.
Dan, tell me about the strategic decision you took without clear data or benchmarks. What was your final decision? What alternatives did you consider here? What were the trade-offs for each? And how did you mitigate risk? Sure. So in 2018, an executive of my bank had an important customer who complained that an app for viewing our bank documents was only available for Android and not for iPad. The challenge on one hand was to ensure we maintained a good relationship with the customer, and on the other to find a way to satisfy what they had requested on a very limited timeline with many other competing priorities. Also, implementing a fully working app for iPad wasn't going to fly due to the complexity and because we had ongoing work already with the Android version. To help bring in more clarity to this decision, I scheduled a meeting with my technical PM in order to determine the complexity of the operation. We analyzed the customer's usage and determined that they were only using certain types of documents, which were pretty straightforward to build compatibility for in a new iPad app. Furthermore, to decide if a smaller version of the app was a good idea, I used the Kano customer satisfaction model, a framework which focuses on customer delight versus implementation investment, upon 3 dimensions. First, basic features. I had just decided with my technical PM that their usage pattern in the Android app would be replicable relatively easily in the iPad app, so the basic features were there. Second, excitement features. While this isn't easily achieved in general, the iPad app request in itself satisfied this requirement. And third, performance. We knew from the Android app that the performance wasn't going to be an issue here. So all these 3 requirements of customer satisfaction in the Kano model being satisfied, I was confident the new iPad app was a good idea. And finally, I informed my executive and the customer would have something available for them within 2 weeks, which we eventually delivered on as a first version. Dan, will you please introduce yourself? I'm an effective senior program manager with over 20 years of experience delivering complex programs for both government and the private sector, with successful track record of delivering multiple programs heavily geared towards IT, cloud, and business transformation, from design to implementation to handover and revenue recognition.
While speaking in cliches might have worked 10 years ago, nowadays you'll have to come up with something more peculiar, especially since your interviewer already has your CV in front of them. Around 5% of the candidates manage to come up with a motivational speech in their elevator pitch. However, most of the time you'll want to focus on some key achievements and ideally use a different wording than the one from your CV in a bid to start a conversation. Starting a conversation on your strength is always a good sign in a job interview.
Dan, thank you very much for taking time to interview with us, but why did you choose our company? Oh, why not? You are an exceptional company with some amazing people. You are the number one in the industry. I've always dreamed of working for a company like yours.
So complimenting them with your answers isn't exactly what the interviewer is expecting from you. Ideally, you'd want to find 1, 2, 3 good reasons on why you actually want to join them. And to give you a hint here, try to focus on your strength. Do you know what your strength is going to a job interview? Because from experience, I know this can be a pretty time-intensive process. And as a final note here, some of you will not be actually sure you want to join the team as of yet. And if this is the case, that you could answer something on the lines of, hey, I'm not sure I want to join the team as of yet. I'm here to learn more about the opportunity and to see if the type of experience I have can add value to the team. So this would be my top tips on answering interview questions. I hope you found this information useful, and thank you very much for watching.